special reports on the war in Israel, you can subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and click the Super Thanks button below. The Israeli army is now closer to Gaza City than ever before. Israeli forces have reached the Strip's most important city and eliminated Hamas's longest tunnel lines, entry and exit points, thanks to the successful progress of the IDF's planned ground offensive. After the destruction of a large number of Hamas tunnel shafts in settlements such as Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and Al-Shati, there was no longer any reason for the IDF not to be in Gaza. This allowed the Israeli army to impose a complete blockade of Gaza. But the most important issue for the IDF at the moment is the Hamas tunnels in Gaza City. This is because senior Hamas leaders such as Yahya Sinwar and Mohammed Deif are based in the main headquarters in the tunnels under Gaza City. The IDF has also begun to use different tactics to force Hamas out of the tunnel lines in Gaza City. The IDF wanted the rats to come out of the sewers. As part of this tactic, the IDF cut off the electricity in Gaza City, but they continued to power the hospitals in Gaza. In fact, the IDF even reported that it was supplying additional fuel to Gaza's largest hospital, Shifa. The idea was that the IDF wanted to expose dangerous Hamas members living in underground tunnels under Gaza, because when the power was cut, the underground tunnels where Hamas members lived would have no communication lines, no internet, no telephones, and most importantly, no air conditioning, leaving the militia no choice but to get out. The power outage and the lack of fuel for Hamas, as well as the IDF's use of artificial intelligence and other ingenious tactics against the tunnel networks, dealt a major blow to Hamas. As a result of the IDF's actions, Hamas militants in the tunnels would have been cut off from the chain of command and would have been thrown into panic and chaos. The IDF's tactics were not limited to this. After the power was cut off, the IDF was also preparing to carry out a critical operation in Shifa, the largest hospital in Gaza City. This was because IDF intelligence teams had discovered Hamas tunnel lines underneath the Shifa hospital, and that these underground tunnels were stocked with a large amount of military ammunition. This ingenious tactic would allow the IDF forces to conduct a special operation against Hamas headquarters, safely remove civilians from the building, and make the hospital safer for Gaza residents in critical condition. Many reinforcements and evacuation vehicles from Israel have been continuously reinforcing the area for 3 days. The electricity has been cut, and it is slowly becoming more and more suffocating for Hamas in the tunnel lines under Gaza City. As we mentioned earlier, the narrow and dark nature of the tunnels, coupled with communication problems such as telephones and the internet, which interrupted the main chain of command, meant that the huge tunnels, tens of meters underground, were becoming their grave. The IDF's ingenious tactics caused great confusion, panic, and fear for them in the tunnels. With the ventilation systems not working, Hamas poured out of the suffocating tunnels into the Shifa hospital and mingled among the civilians. But the hospital was already surrounded by IDF forces. Israeli special forces, backed by additional troops, entered Shifa hospital in Gaza City to carry out a precise and targeted operation against Hamas infrastructure in the area. At least 5 Hamas fighters were killed by the soldiers in armed clashes outside the hospital. No Israeli soldiers were injured. The operation continued until morning, and the Israel Defense Forces found weapons and Hamas assets inside. The IDF claimed to have found concrete evidence that Hamas was using the hospital as a military facility. The IDF said it would make public some of what was found inside. Following this announcement, social media was immediately flooded with photos of Hamas's military ammunition and equipment hidden in the building and underneath it. On the other hand, it was reported that during the IDF raid, there was no friction between the soldiers and the patients and medical staff. After the situation was brought under control, the IDF tweeted that the building served as a protection for Hamas's fortified underground command center. Israel believes that some of Hamas's 240 hostages are being held in the hospital at the same time. The IDF also says the operation will share intelligence information about the captives. A former IDF officer, who did not wish to be named, suggested that Israel would expand its operation at the hospital if necessary. In addition to these important posts, prior to the raid on Shifa Hospital, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu had a long telephone conversation with U.S. President Joe Biden. The White House said the conversation focused on efforts to free the hostages. The Biden administration also confirmed Israel's long-standing allegations that Hamas is using medical facilities for military purposes. John Kirby, spokesman for the White House National Security Council, said that they have information that Hamas is using some hospitals in the Gaza Strip, including Al-Shifa and the tunnels underneath, to hide and support its operations and to hold hostages. They are storing weapons there and preparing to respond to an Israeli military operation against that facility, Kirby said, citing U.S. intelligence assessments. Spokesman Kirby stated that the scenario emphasizes the difficult military operation that Israel is trying to carry out because of Hamas's entrenchment among the civilian population. We all know that Hamas's actions do not diminish Israel's responsibility to protect civilians. It is therefore important that John Kirby highlighted the danger of members of Hamas mixing among civilians in the hospital. What the IDF wants to do in the other 34 hospitals in Gaza, including Al-Shifa, is to cut off the electricity in these critical areas. However, the IDF says that it will not cut the power in the hospitals, but only in the areas close to the hospitals in Gaza. Thus, Hamas will be forced to go from the underground of Gaza City to the surface in order to survive, and will go to crowded public spaces, such as hospitals, in order to survive. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, spokesman for the Israel Defense Forces, pointed this out in a press conference. Admiral Hagari said that hospitals in the Strip are at risk of losing their protected status under international law due to Hamas's use of these areas for military activities. Admiral Hagari added that the evacuation of Al-Quds Hospital in Gaza has now been completed. In this area too, Israel first cut off electricity and then waited for Hamas to emerge from the tunnels in the area. The IDF's recent destruction of numerous Hamas tunnel shafts, entry and exit points, and its attempts to keep Hamas away from public buildings such as hospitals, schools, and theaters indicate that this situation has changed. So the Israeli army is now succeeding in keeping Hamas out of public spaces in Gaza. Thank you for following us. We work day and night to bring you the fastest and most reliable news. In order not to miss the videos prepared by our team, including the latest developments and special reports on the war in Israel, you can subscribe to our channel, like our videos, and click the super thanks button below. See you in our next work.